Well, good morning, everybody. Nigel has very kindly let me introduce the show this morning, and wherever you are in the world, I bid you good day. This is the Master Chess web show, and it developed from a project Nigel and I formed in the 1990s called the Master Chess Roadshow, where we travel around the UK, running training weekends, making dodgy sandwiches, and generally having a good time. And I hope a lot of people enjoyed what we were doing. And we decided recently to reinvigorate the project, by producing these web shows. Now, Nigel will point you towards our website. The project's developing, and we'd like you to sign up, become a subscriber on YouTube, like our videos, go on to our Twitch channel, and also become a follower there, and hopefully a subscriber, because that's what we need to really make this show even better than it is already. Over to Nigel.
Okay, well, I thought I would show you our website as usual, because this is where we're posting the videos that go on. We've got a YouTube channel as well, right? That is linked down here, and there's our Twitch TV. Now, if you use the contact form, this is a way of sending us questions, because we do like to try and answer people's questions if we can. So it's your name, your email, subject, message. Well, you're going to have to send a message if you want to contact, and you just got to prove you're human here. Then we have the guests area, and this is people that have been on the show, and this is tripled this week. So now we've had Adrian Michelchisin, brilliant interview with him. Another really good one with Charlie Story, and also with Malcolm Payne. Right, so we've had three real personalities, and very interesting guests, and we're hoping to have more. Anyway, I think with that it's on with the show, and I think it's Andrew wants to take us through the first game or two today on the topic of the backward pawn in the Sicilian.
Yes, I'm using these games that you're going to see for training purposes at the moment. They generally go down well with groups because they are very instructive. And this will please Adrian Michelchisin, because the first two games are what we call classical games. They come from the archives. They took place quite a while ago, but they are incredibly instructive. And they do feature very famous players. So in the first game, we've got Wolfgang Unziker, and he's playing against David Bronstein with the black pieces, a household name. You might not know an enormous amount about Unziker, but he was the West German #1 for a very long time, an extremely classical player. He used to play all sorts of very straightforward ideas in the opening, which you're going to see in this game. Perhaps too straightforward. Do you know anything about Unziker, Nigel?
Not an awful lot. He's sort of been on he's the guy that always finished second in games with great players, you know. So he's participated in a lot of great games, but usually on the losing side. It's a bit like tell you another player that sort of a bit like that, Philippe. Right, he was a brilliant player, and he was just losing, you know, to famous players. You know, you get him playing sort of Tal or Spassky or something, and he would come second in these games. You know, so you get a few players like that, brilliant players in their own right, but they just lost out in one-to-one encounters with the all-time greats.
I think not everybody can be an all-time great, can they? But I think Unziker, you know, he was West German #1 for a very long time until he was superseded by Hubner, I believe. I might be wrong about that, but that sounds about right.
Yeah.
And he played in lots of Olympiads and represented his country with distinction. And as you say, he played in a lot of international tournaments. He was, you know, he was a regular invite to the very top events. Did he not play in the Piatigorsky Cup when Fischer was playing there?
I think he might have done, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he was on that level. But this is an interesting game because it actually features one of Unziker's very favourite lines against the Sicilian. So I think there were several Unziker Fischer games in this variation, the Najdorf. We should talk about the NIGEL for a little while, because obviously this is one of the absolute top favourites of world champions since the Second World War. And why do you think that is, Nigel? What's so attractive about A6?
Well, it's basically black is looking to attack the e4 pawn, and he's got the flexibility here of moving his e pawn 1 square or 2, because the systems with either e6 or e5. A6 is almost always a useful move, and black will be able to play b5 later and bishop b7 to put pressure on this pawn on e4. And it attracted a very high level following, because it was a way of playing for a win with black, but playing logical moves. Because, you know, we all know these openings where you try and confuse the hell out of your opponent, you know, and you know, just mix it up. But the Najdorf is a very correct opening, but also very dynamic. Now, the drawback at club level, first of all, is actually getting it, because I'm going to show you something that I thought worked very well. Because so many people were like robotically playing the moves that they thought they should, then I was giving some students c3, because whatever Sicilian they played, if they played a Najdorf, they would play d6 next move, and then you on move 3 they have to take on d4, and then now on move 4 you've got to go knight f6, and then they know they go here. So it was amazing the number of games that went like this if you gave your student c3. And similarly, if they played a dragon player with white, they would get this played instead, because again, you know, black sort of brainwashed into repeating all these moves that they thought they should know, played all the right moves, but then ended up in completely the wrong position. I don't know if you've come across that, Andrew, that you know, you can put a spanner in the works by you know, exploiting this brainwashing that people are doing a bit too often.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
No, not at all. Just a point. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is that so many people play 2 knight c3 against the Sicilian, and that leaves them with options like f4 here, which is actually quite good. So the best answer to knight c3 is probably knight c6, but then you've got to watch out for white playing knight f3 and d4 and going into a Sicilian which isn't your Najdorf. Now, I think Joe Gallagher used to play g6 here and go into an accelerated dragon. He, of course, was a very notable Najdorf player. So I honestly don't get why a lot of club players play the Najdorf, because it's at club level you get so many anti-Sicilians and also 2 knight c3s that I don't think you actually get your Najdorf very often. And then there's a shed load of theory that comes with it. So
yes, that's true.
Anyway, sorry.
Not at all. Not at all. Let's go back. Okay, so what we got here? Here we go. Yeah, now it's actually worthwhile pointing out here that if black plays e5, which you can do, white can play bishop b5 check. Now, it may be that this variation could be revived from black's point of view. I think Suba tried to do it, and other grandmasters, but in general this position is reckoned to be good for white. Why is that? Because if, let's say, black plays bishop d7, exchanging off the light square bishops is going to favour white, who's trying to dominate the squares f5 and d5. So this is so unattractive for black, this positional concession, that a6 was thought to be very important to stop bishop b5 check, so that black could prepare e5. I think that was the original Najdorf thinking, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, now, as Nigel says, the problem with this is whatever level you play, and it's getting worse. It's just getting worse. You have to know an incredible amount of theory. There are a number of lines that, you know, bishop g5 is one, bishop e3 is another, bishop c4 is a third, and it doesn't stop there. White can play f4. In fact, in recent grandmaster play, the latest trend is to play absolutely anything. moves that look like complete garbage in order to avoid theory. So, for instance, in recent games, we've seen stuff like A3. We've seen stuff like Rook G1. That might not be too bad. Can you think of any other rubbish that we've seen to player gets denied of?
The various Queen F3s and Queen D3s.
Yeah, Queen F3. Charlie Story would approve. Queen D3. Yeah, any sort of move to avoid theoretical main lines. But of course, back then, when was this played? 1950s, I think. They were still concerned with playing classical chess, and Unziker played Bishop E2, which is a dangerous move. It's a classical move. It's a developing move. There can't be anything wrong with it. White's going to castle and see what transpires. And in this game, Bronstein plays the absolutely standard Najdorf move here, E5, driving the knight backwards. Right, well, in this particular game, White played knight B3. Now, that's not a great square for the knight. Not yet. Karpov used to like this line with White. He used to play it very successfully. He would castle, he'd play F4, put his king in the corner, maybe start a kingside attack. So Black has got to be a little bit careful in this position as to how he develops his counterplay. Having said that, it can be done, and Bronstein just simply played bishop to E7. Bishop E6 is another move. I'm not actually too sure which is the better, but both moves are reasonable. So let's just go back. I'll go back here. Okay, well, let me go back. It will let me go back if I press the right key. So bishop E7. So now what we have here is Black nursing a pawn weakness right from the start of the game. And this represents an interesting position for study for up-and-coming players, because you say that the pawn on D6 is generally weak, it's backward, it's on a half-open file, it can be attacked. So why should Black go in for this position at all? Well, the thing is that then we come to the question of dynamic compensation for the pawn. I mean, in an endgame, that pawn's miserable, but Black's not going to let the game drift into an endgame. He's going to exchange pieces at his own convenience. He's going to keep the game complicated. And he, as Nigel said earlier, might focus his attention on the pawn at E4, B5, bishop B7, and keep White at bay. So the whole struggle coming out of this opening is whether Black can get active enough to offset his pawn weakness on D6. And generally, it has thought to be perfectly okay for Black. I mean, I don't know what you think about this, Nigel.
Yeah, I would add that the minor pieces are very important. That if White can dominate the D5 square by exchanging off the knight on F6, and then somehow bring his minor pieces so he occupies D5, the position will probably be good for him. Now, one important tactical point, if we go back to this point, if White was to try this with bishop G5 here, then Black has got he doesn't have knight takes E4 right now, but this can become a threat. So a possible plan for White is like this, actually, and then Queen D3. See, this has been played quite a lot from the database. I wonder if this is why they started playing bishop E7. Sorry, bishop E6. Now, one thing to note here as well is that sometimes White has gone this way, so that then bishop E7 is thought to be an error because of bishop G5, and then Black definitely doesn't have any knight takes E4 tricks because the knight on F3 covers G5, and then the White will hope to be able to bring this knight round maybe to D2, C4, E3 or something, to control D5. But the exchange of sets of minor pieces to control the D5 square is it's basically what I would add to what Andrew said already.
Let's drop back then.
Yeah, okay. So castles.
Bishop E3. Yeah, now it's interesting. I fed this position to a group of kids on Monday evening, and some of them were pretty good. And I gave them three alternatives for Black. And this is a tricky question, even for strong players. I said, should black play here? Queen c7. Should he play b5 or should he play bishop e6? And this is not an easy question to answer for people who've never seen this position before. So, would you like to have a try in the audience before we go on?
I would personally. I would probably play. I don't know the Najdorf, by the way, which is probably going to show. Let's go for bishop e6.
I thought you'd choose that move.
Well, it's the top. I didn't look at the book, by the way. It is the top choice.
Okay, but we've got that dratted book by the side of the.
Yeah. Now, I mean, but I'll explain the reason. The reason is that I'm probably more likely to want to keep flexibility with the knight. So the knight may still come out to c6. Also, if we play knight d7, we block the bishop in. Probably the queen is most flexible on d8 right now. Bishop e6 probably means that I'm going to meet f4 with ef. Bishop takes and then put the knight on c6.
Yeah, I think you have to do that. Shall we see that? Let's have a look. Bishop e6 here. And white goes f4. And now the bishop can get in the way. I mean, you could play queen c7 here. And if f5, go bishop c4. That's kind of like a well-known idea. But with the exchange of light squared bishops, then the weakness of the square d5 can become real. So as Nigel says, you're probably going to take this and play knight here. And once again, black's maybe thinking about the move d5 even to free the shackles, if there were any shackles in the first place. So that's one way to play the variation. It's interesting that Queen c7 was given a exclamation mark in the book I got this from, which was Pacman's excellent trilogy on chess, complete chess strategy or something like that. Even though, is that Stockfish giving these excellent question marks?
I Stockfish notated the games beforehand, just in case we did, I did something really dozy when in commentating on it.
Well, what was interesting about showing the game to the kids is virtually all of them went for b5, which is not a good move here. And the problem with it is that white can play knight d5, and you've weakened your queen side too early. Black doesn't have a reasonable move here. It's not easy to find a reasonable move, because if he goes knight takes knight, queen takes knight, something's dropping. And if you don't take the knight, what are you going to play? The b6 square is very weak. b5 is a major positional mistake, and yet all the kids went for it, which pleased me in many ways, because it justified the idea of showing this game. Anyway, Queen c7 was played by Bronstein, and Unziker played a4. And once again, I asked the kids here, what would you play with black? And I was pleased to see that most of them found black's move, which was the important b6, even though Stockfish doesn't like it. So what is he recommending then if it doesn't like b6?
Well, it wants bishop e6 for some reason.
And let white play a5.
Yeah, and then I suppose go knight bd7, which looks looks reasonable, doesn't it?
And if f4?
F4 we probably take again and then put the knight on e5.
Yeah. Yeah, black's quite active.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's the machine's response. The human response is perhaps not to allow a5. I don't know what you think about that. I wouldn't like the idea of a5 coming at me, but again, I don't play the Najdorf on a regular basis, so maybe a Najdorf specialist would immediately play bishop e6 without a second thought. But it looks risky to me. Anyway, Bronstein manages to use this b6 move very constructively over the next few moves. I mean, first of all, he gets his pieces out, and then he puts his queen on b7. Well, this was perhaps the reason why Unziker didn't beat really strong players, because what White's set up is a kind of holding situation, isn't he? But what dynamically is he actually doing? That's the problem. I think you need dynamic plans to beat a strong player, because they're not going to beat themselves by blundering. That's why they're quite strong. And Black is thinking about going places here. I mean, he's got some play, hasn't he, Nigel? What is White doing actually?
Well, that's the problem. It's what Mikhail Suba said in his book Dynamic Chess Strategy, which is a really excellent book, by the way. He said that one of the problems that White has in openings like the Hedgehog, and I think it applies here too, is that he can get to a point where he can't improve his position. He puts his pieces on beautiful squares, and according to the old books, then that is when he should have a combination. Right, now, very often this is not actually the what's going to happen. You could get a position which looks picture perfect, but you can't make it any better because it's too perfect. And meanwhile, your opponent, whose position might be a little bit ugly, can improve his position. Now, here we've got something where White's developed all these pieces, Black's got a backward pawn. So according to the old static assessments of the position, it would have to be good for White. Better pawn structure, nice pieces, what can possibly be wrong? But the problem then arises, what is he going to do? And that's why I think the idea of pawn levers, pawn action, what you're going to be able to do with your pawns is so important. Now here White can play pawn to a5, but then Black will play b5, and White achieves less than nothing. And he can also play, say, pawn to f4 as his other potential lever, and then Black will be able to take and put a knight on c6 and e5. So none of the pawn play appears to be working very well for White, and for that reason he's kind of out of plans. Right? Even though his position looks nice, where's it going? You know, all dressed up and nowhere to go.
Well, I suppose White can put his rooks on the d file, but even then, it doesn't really appear very frightening.
Yeah,
White's not ready to put a knight on d5 at all. That's the problem. So he played rook d2. I mean, I guess that's the idea, and it sets a little trap. I mean, if Black foolishly takes this pawn, then obviously bishop f3 is curtains. But there's no way grandmasters are going to fall for that trap. But rook d2 is not concerned with the trap as such. He's just concerned with trying to find a plan. So maybe rook a d1 is Unziker's plan at some point soon. Black, meanwhile, just continues to improve his position very slightly. And now the key move. Well, this was another instructive moment in the game for the students, because it's all about actually dissolving a weakness. And this, again, is a very important learning point for anybody in chess. You may have a weakness in your game, but it won't necessarily cost you the game, because one of the ways you can negate the problems is to get rid of the weakness. And so d5 makes perfect sense here. Not only that, it brings the Black position to life. And further, it doesn't get any negative annotation from Stockfish. So I feel particularly pleased about that.
First move after the like move 6 for Black, where Stockfish hasn't criticised.
Yeah. Really, the plug should be pulled out.
The setup I have with Stockfish running on Hayek's Chess Explorer Pro, then I don't know if we can actually see it. This will this is actually really annoying. So we go right to the end. Right, it says White loses 0.5 pawn per move. 1 blunder, 3 mistakes, 7 inaccuracies. Black loses 0.18 pawn per move. 1 mistake, 8 inaccuracies. And it could have added, not bad for humanoids.
Psychologically reduced rubble by reading that.
Thought I would just show you that.
The thought of you losing half a pawn a move fills me with Anyway, Black has activated his game and stands very well. I mean, White has got a solid position, and that's it. It might not even be that solid, because his pawns are slightly compromised. I guess it can't be too bad for white in this position, can it?
Well, I don't know.
But
I
he's
mean,
not going very far. That's the problem. He's not
yeah,
going far.
it's like uh, see, black now has control of the centre, mainly, mainly because of this pawn on e5. White's main chance for salvation, I would say, is exchanges. If he can start hoovering off pieces, then he might be able to save himself.
Well, that last move, I reckon most human beings would play that, including Wolfgang Unziger. It's given a question mark by Stockfish. Doesn't like it. I guess black could just defend the bishop.
Yeah.
Knight comes to c1. e4 doesn't like that either, although once again it's very tempting. I think you'll agree, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, e4 makes perfect sense. Bishop c6 apparently is a more noxious move.
A micro improvement.
Yeah, because then if white plays b3, there's bishop b4, skewering the pinning the rook against the queen.
I suppose that does highlight that actually white's got a bit of a problem. His pawn on a4 is sticking out like a sore thumb rather than cramping black in any way. It's actually proving a liability, isn't it?
Yeah.
But anyway, Bronstein went e4. He couldn't resist it. And I don't think many people could, frankly. Queen f2, Unziker kind of treading water, attacking the pawn on b6, but that's easily defended. All these moves getting hammered by the computer. And now pawn takes. So once again, that's a little bit unstereotyped, isn't it? You would expect him to take back with the rook, but I think black's just training his sights on white's queen side now. And
the centre, doesn't it? B takes c5.
Yeah, I mean, the problem remains for white. What is he actually doing here? Just treading water, trying to make a draw, I think, in many ways. And really getting hammered. These moves are getting hammered, aren't they? Again, that's what's wrong with that. That looks totally natural, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's because of f4. Right, he doesn't like it because of
that's what white did.
Yeah.
Well, c4. Bronstein makes his bishop temporarily looking like an overgrown pawn. But that did not get any criticism from the machine. So white played b3. Did he need to do that? I guess he did.
Well, his b2 pawn is
it not yet hanging, is it? Not yet hanging. But the move c3 is hanging in the air, isn't it? It's some pawn sack.
Yeah.
I'm pausing because it's hard to see anything active for white. If you move your queen, then e3 could be a problem, bringing all the black pieces to life. Meanwhile, black could play something like rook c8 and then maybe c3 and really smash up the white queen side. And white really doesn't want to play c3 himself because that would leave the a pawn looking very weak. So white's got some issues here, but b3, of course, doesn't necessarily help. h3, well, I think that's a product of a man who can't really see what to do. So he's just trying to give his king a bit of space. What is actually very instructive about this game is the way that actually a really strong grandmaster is reduced to actually doing very, very little. You know, he's got nothing to do. So black just strengthening the queen side position. Pawn takes pawn. Double question mark. Didn't like that at all.
I think he lost like 4 pawns on that move, which sent his average down.
Yeah, but his queen side is in tatters, isn't it?
Well, his whole pawn structure is just horrendous here.
What does it recommend?
Recommends c3, which is only slightly better for black. So it's not seeing anything forcing after c3.
No.
Whereas after knight b3, then Bronstein.
If it's a major mistake, it's a major mistake. I mean, this is
yeah.
But black's queen side is still very weak. White's queen side, excuse me. Anyway, the point is that we're dealing with human beings here. Knight to b3,
On the
and
whole.
now e3. That's something White didn't want to happen, because now the roads are open towards not only his king as well as the white queen side. So Bronstein moves in. I think Pacman gave that an exclamation mark.
Yeah, Stockfish doesn't like it.
Arrogantly refuted by Stockfish. Then, what could be wrong with that move? It looks very strong indeed, threatening knight c4.
He thinks g6 and knight h5 is even stronger. That's the
maybe. But by giving this a question mark, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's just not the best move, maybe. I mean, it doesn't look. I can't see what's wrong with this move.
No, it's a perfectly good natural move. I mean, I think basically we need to largely ignore Stockfish notations and computer notations.
We could turn them off.
Well, I could have not annotated them in the first place, but it's just with a recent spate of games, I was generally so clueless that it did help me with some of the tactical stuff.
Well, basically, Unziker is coming to regret his pawn advances. That's essentially what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful square for the knight. Forks the rook and the pawn at f4. Rook e4, and now another excellent move, which I think I challenged the group to find. They didn't find it. h5.
They didn't find an awful lot, did they?
Well, this is not an easy game, is it? I mean, let's face it. I mean, you want to challenge some kids. You don't put up stuff they can just solve. Yeah, h5. Well, what's that? That's a decoy, isn't it? It's decoying the queen away from the defense of the pawn on f4. He dropped back. Oh dear. The problem is not the fact that the exchange is dropping. It's not that. It's the fact that queen takes c2 is an absolute bone crusher. And after rook d5, e2, rook takes g5. Bronstein was able to fashion an unexpected finish. Took a queen, allowing rook takes g7 check. It takes cojones to play like this. King in the corner. Queen g5. And now, can you see? Don't look at that screen with all the moves on. What Black did next.
There we go. A bit late.
You took a look at the screen. That's cheating. Yeah, I mean, not many people would expect that to be the killer blow.
Yeah, so if king takes, then rook e2 check.
Mate next
king
move.
f3, queen f2 is mate.
Yes.
And
queen takes.
Rook
e2.
Rook e2.
And then he resigned. But if you go check, check, king goes to coolly up to h6.
Yeah.
And then that ends the affair. But a nice finish that. I like that. I mean, it's after all this stuff going on, he bangs away with queen takes g2. Really nice.
Yeah. You need to be able to calculate very accurately to be able to do that. I made the point in a webinar I did yesterday evening that if you are afraid of phantoms in a game because you're not seeing tactics, then that actually affects the strategic flow of your game, because you end up sort of over defending against opponents' phantom threats. Now that was extremely cold-blooded by Bronstein at the end.
Yeah,
right? So you absolutely, there's no way you can get around the issue of tactics.
Well, so the next game, this was the second game I showed in the session, and it's touted as one of the absolutely glorious Sicilian masterpieces. Poor old Unziker's getting a hammering in this session, but never mind. Here he is with White again, and he's playing against Timerov. But the fact is that I've never seen a game where a grandmaster, plays so poorly with white pieces. I don't know what happened to Unziker in this game, but he really, you will see that he really can only be described as piddled around for the whole game, doing absolutely nothing. It was almost as if he's waiting for Timerov to blunder. And I just said to the kids, well, you can't do that against a really strong player. You've got You've got to play dynamically. You can't beat anybody really strong by just doing nothing. Whereas actually at children's level, at club players level, a lot of people play like that. That's why the London system has become so popular. It's like a rope-a-dope strategy. All you're doing, you're putting your pieces on solid squares and waiting for the opponent to blunder, which is, of course, what for the most part they do. Just sick and tired of facing that London system board chain or something like it. And but at grandmaster level, it's not a winning strategy, is it, Nigel?
Now, I think the issue with Unziker is that he was brought up on sort of quite old-fashioned chess, and his understanding of positions was quite static. He thought that if he had these advantages in the bank, then all good things would come to him. And there's a few players like that. I tell you who he reminds me of, and that's Ellis Garzes. Because Ellis Garzes was an incredibly good player, but he was also quite static. He was like a Capablanca clone, but without Capablanca's genius. So he did like all the sensible moves, and he calculated quite well. But when he came to play against players with a sort of more dynamic understanding of positions, then it's like he ran into a wall and couldn't do anything with them. So you have a number of players like this. Most of them, they had their careers interrupted by World War II.
Yeah.
Right. Because that was like the critical period, because you had the guys that were brought up on the classicists, Steinitz, Capablanca, Tarrasch. When the World Wars hit, then they had interruptions in their careers, so you still had them kind of around. Kashdan, he's another one. Right, Kashdan again was like over classical. Reshevsky, his friend, was much more dynamic. Reshevsky was, had a bit of genius about him, so he still understood the classical stuff, but you could see that he was seeing a lot more as well.
Well, in this game, it's another Sicilian. This time around, Black's played knight c6, not playing the Najdorf. It turns into what we call the classical variation. But Unziker sticks with his move, bishop e2. I think he played this against all Sicilian systems, more or less, if he could. And it's up now to Black to play a move. And the reason this is a sister relation to the other game is that Black again played e5. But this time Unziker dropped back to f3, which brings us to the question that Nigel was posing earlier. And this is a question I posed to the group. What should Black play here? And virtually none of them got the right answer. I wonder if you could get the answer if you don't know Sicilian theory and avoid looking at the game on the screen. It's very hard to do. But what do you think Black should do here? Well, it's very important to stop bishop g5 in this position for all the reasons Nigel mentioned earlier. So h6 was Black's move, and I think it's a good move here. It's not a loss of time. Black's got plenty of time on his side because White's developing slowly. I guess another move is bishop e6 here, but then you're allowing White to go through with his plan. And after bishop e7, takes. We get a kind of Sveshnikov-like position where, I guess White just plays knight d5 and will claim to be a little bit better here. Those who play the Sveshnikov will know it's not so clear. But in general, White should be a bit better. I'm not totally sure. I'm not totally sure. Black can put his bishop here and so on. What do you think, Nigel? White a bit better?
On that last move, I would. My attention was attracted to knight e7, allowing knight take f6 check.
Wow, that's
right. But just to be able to control d5 and f5. So knight e7, knight takes f6 check, g takes f6.
That would be a really difficult concept for average players to just understand. They think the king is being smashed up, but Black has dynamic compensation because White is quite passively placed at the moment.
Yeah,
I don't think that would be very easy for most players to play with Black.
Yeah, because next move you can play pawn to d5 probably, and you know your pawns are mobile. But this is the I think this reflects the modern view of pawn structure, that you need like some dynamism in your pawn structure, otherwise you run out of plans.
I don't think this is too bad for black. It can't be that bad, can it?
No, it's probably not terrible.
No.
You know, because white will struggle to actually launch an attack against the d6 pawn. You know, so say black plays queen d7 and rook d8, then white would have to move his knight from d5 to bear down on that pawn. And black has also got a plan of something like g6 and playing for f5.
Yeah, yeah.
So you know, but black's pawns are mobile. Although he's got a weakness, he's also got mobility.
Anyway, the point is that Timorov's move just rids black of the need to think about that, and is saying to white, "Well, what are you actually doing here?" And of course, so Unziker is just really developing his pieces. Now, I think this is actually a kind of well-known way of combating this variation, which I think is called the Boloslavsky Variation. And white again is setting up a position where, you know, if you actually do anything with black, it's going to react to your disadvantage. That's the main idea of what white is doing. Black would like to play d5 and get rid of his backward pawn. That's going to take some preparation. And instantly does that, white's going to be ready with takes on d5 and then maybe takes on e5. So black has got to do an awful lot of preparation before he gets to play d5, which is his main aim. But at the same time, what is white doing in this position? He's just allowing black a free hand. And despite Stockfish not liking that move, I don't really agree. In fact, it prompts Ullman sorry, not Ullman, a different player, Unziker to play this move a3. And it really is a situation where white is kind of waiting for black to activate his game. But again, you can't really play like that against somebody strong. I mean, the way Timorovh plays, he just gets his pieces into really good positions, even though the computer doesn't like it. And now knight to b1, queen to a8. Knight comes to d2. Well, the next moves by black, I think, are pretty good. I don't know what you think about this, Nigel, but
Oh yeah, it's a really good maneuver. I mean, even Stockfish likes it, which is
refreshing.
makes it change. Yeah, it's funny. Stockfish is so critical of human chess that you almost get the impression that it's being patronising if it gives you an exclamation mark. You know, so
Well,
like,
even
oh, well done, humanoid! You found a good move.
even humans can see that black is doing quite well here. White has just done nothing really. White's going nowhere. Black, meanwhile, knight can come to c5 at a moment's notice, can come to f4 at a moment's notice. d5 could be played, could be planned. Rook fc8, just doubling the rooks. You know, the position just looks easier to play for black in a big way. And the e4 pawn is a bit tender. So Unziker, as I say, in this game, he just, it's a remarkable effort by him because he does absolutely nothing. He goes on a knight's tour of the board. Watch that knight. Watch one of his knights move. Here we go. There we are. Off it goes on its journey. Where does it end up? I think it ends up on b1. If you can believe that. Let's see this wonderful journey. Incidentally, even the kids were very impressed by this knight maneuver. There were a number of jeers from the audience as this knight wheeled its way towards the board. This incredible journey goes on. Yeah, there it is. It ends up on b1. And in addition, it's got a double question mark from Stockfish. Setting the pieces up for the next game and become a reality.
I tell you, it's a tough life being a professional chess player.
Wait a minute, that knight was on f3 a minute ago.
Because Unziker's gonna, he's got his moves jeered, for probably for hundreds of years. This knight maneuver, is because it found its way into the books. This game.
something else. It really is unbelievable to see that knight going to B1 for F3 a minute ago. Anyway, there we are. So D5. Clearly, this is a big moment. What does the computer give us better then? Because that looks to me to be really very natural indeed.
It says knight takes D3, simply.
Yeah, and after pawn takes.
So it's giving this rook takes C1, bishop takes C1, rook C2.
That's similar
But
to
it says
you
don't need D5.
It's very similar to the game though.
Yeah.
Or maybe this way, I mean, white ends up getting paralysed in the game, and maybe he's paralysed there, but in perhaps a slightly better way. But I mean, you can see why the guy doesn't give up his beautiful knight for that crummy bishop. However, that's a human's way of thinking about the position. D5, Taimanov can't resist it. Russian school of chess says black must play D5. Pawn takes pawn. Well, he did it the other way around.
Yeah. It's still very good for black.
Well, more than very good. I would say it's winning. So F3, obviously rook takes E5 is answered by the ruinous bishop takes G2. And I don't think white is coming back from that. No, but this move D5 is highly instructive, isn't it? I mean, for people who are learning the Sicilian, just learning the Sicilian, you want to see the thematic ideas, and that is a key idea, isn't it? Dissolving your backward pawn.
Yeah, it also gives black a 1-0 pawn majority in the centre, which makes it a bit like an extremely good Rubinstein French, where you finally get E5 in. You've done all your C5 and everything, and then you get E5 in.
Well, now it remains to finish white off. White's set up his fantastic knight situation on the queen side. He's even making room for the knight to come to A3, but no such luck, as the knight is now penned in. Really, this is a game Bronstein will want to forget. Queen comes to C6. Unziker, yeah. Sorry, Unziker. Keep on forgetting his name.
Yeah. And now he is... Well, he doesn't have any moves, does he? And meanwhile, black is threatening knight F5 and bishop F4 and everything.
Well, white resigned.
Yeah. So white, 1 blunder, 2 mistakes, 6 inaccuracies. Right, losing 0.59 pawns per move. So slightly worse game than the previous one.
How many moves was this?
So 30 moves.
0.5 pawns per move.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. So he's lost about 16 pawns in this game.
Black was pretty accurate. Loses 0.25 pawns per move.
It just goes to show, if you let a really strong opponent play chess, they can absolutely demolish you. You've got to mix it up and try and stop the opponent from just dominating like that. It's hopeless play, isn't it? By poor old Unziker, who had a bad day at the office.
The next game is much more hard fought. So we're going to move on from these E5 Sicilians, which are a very important type of position.
Right, I'm going to let you take over on this one then, Nigel.
Okay. Right, so we've got white is Alexei Shirov, black Michael Adams.
Just nipping out for 1 minute, okay?
Okay, and for Alexei Shirov, he used to play D4 all the time. He was one of the early adopters of the 4F3 line of the Nimzo Indian, and it had been played earlier by Florin Georgiou, and I think Martz played it as well. Later on, he switched to 1E4, which is probably more in keeping with his dynamic style. Here, he's playing the rock-solid Michael Adams, who has been the top British player for some time, along with Nigel Short. I think he was edging Nigel out for a while. So we've got a Queen's Indian defence, and all of these are standard moves, and now we have what has become standard, pawn to D5. This is an old pawn sacrifice which I think was originally pioneered by Wolfgang Ullmann when they wanted to put the knight on d4. But then Lev Polyevsky adopted it in his match against Viktor Korchnoi and introduced knight h4. I think it was knight h4 that was Polyevsky's idea. Now, what white wants to do is recapture on d5 with a space advantage, but when black goes c6, it becomes a kind of pawn sacrifice. So white takes on d5, knight takes, and then brings his knight into the f5 square, arguing that just this very well placed knight and the possibility to kick black around with e4 will give him full compensation.
Didn't Kasparov win some nice games with this?
Yeah, I think so. And I think Romanishin was playing it for a while until it became very popular. So there are a few people that sort of jumped on the bandwagon, but it was Polyevsky who was really the originator of this system.
There's one more idea. Can I just drop back one or two moves?
Sure.
How do we get back?
Back arrow?
Yeah. Oh, not that far.
Right, okay.
A little bit. Yeah, this position. Because Ullmann's idea was to go knight d4, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Now, actually, this doesn't make any difference in the c6 variation. I used to play this myself with white, but it does make a difference when black goes knight c6.
Okay.
And the difference being is that when white takes this, black takes this, white takes back with the queen, and then black can go here. And that's not possible in the other line.
Okay.
So there are differences between d4 and h4. Yeah. So sorry for that. I just let's go
okay.
back. There we go.
I think for a Queen's Indian player, because I started playing the Queen's Indian in the early 1990s when I finally gave up the modern defence.
Haven't you produced a book on it recently?
Yeah, Nimzo and Queen's Indian.
Yeah.
And I dealt with flank openings as well, because those become an issue when you've got the Nimzo and Queen's Indian in your repertoire. Yeah, this caused a lot of people to migrate to the bishop a6 variation, because they were very worried about the danger of this line.
Is that what you recommend in your book?
No, I actually give going into this and then declining the pawn sack. So bishop a6 became very popular. There's some dangerous stuff against this as well. Now, in my book, I gave knight a6.
Ah, Tiviakov's move.
Yeah, Tiviakov's move, which is it's an alternative. Black is doing without some space, but I like quite a lot of Tiviakov's openings because they're very flexible. So knight a6 is possible here too, and that way you get white more into a chess game rather than have him kind of flowing into the attack. So ed, knight h4, c6, cd, knight takes d5, knight f5. This is quite a menacing knight. Now black goes knight c7, and this is to bring the knight round to the e6 square later. Well, actually that doesn't happen. He now plays pawn to d5. White goes knight c3, black plays bishop f6, and white has actually now he's mainly played e takes d5, but he's also played bishop f4, rook g1, rook e1, and even queen g4. These moves have also been played.
Of course, at this level, we can expect Mickey to have a clear knowledge of those variations and where he's going in this position.
Yeah. I mean, he's never been an incredibly theoretical player, but he knows what he plays. E takes d5, knight takes d5, so black is still a pawn up. Now, again, this is the main line. Knight takes d5, c takes d5, and here white plays bishop f4 with the idea of bringing something into d6. Now, the cold-blooded bishop takes b2 has scored the best for black. Right, black's emerging with a healthy plus score in that line. But of course, it's all going to be very dangerous against a tactician of Shirov's caliber.
What happens after that?
Good question.
Bishop takes.
b2,
What does he do now?
rook b1, bishop f6, rook e1, and Stockfish gives knight a6.
And that's okay for black according to the machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see why. I mean, you could go knight d6
Says
and take b5.
Gives the position as equal. Queen g4, g6, knight check, king here, knight check. That's Stockfish's assessment. Draw by perpetual check.
King in the corner, no good.
I don't know. Presumably, there's something there for white.
Well, bishop e7 could be dangerous, couldn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Okay, so black can make a draw there.
So
it's white who's making the draw. Actually, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you prepare a line like this and you've got a draw in the bank, right, and there's chances for black to go wrong, then in practice you might do pretty well.
Yeah.
So Mickey chose the more circumspect knight d7, didn't want to take that pawn, and now white goes knight d6. Then we get some interesting play with bishop a6, and here Shirov decides to sack the exchange with queen takes d5, and probably he should play just rook e1.
With ongoing compensation, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, black can play maybe knight c5 there, I don't know.
Yeah, he can do knight c5. And
the idea of knight d3.
Yeah. But he's only got a pawn extra, and white's pieces are showing a lot of activity now.
Yeah. This tends towards equality, I think, don't you? I don't think so.
Yeah, probably. One of the reasons that I think lines like this may not appeal to everybody is because of their forcing nature, and possibly you're going to get equality at the end of the day anyway.
Mm.
So now white takes on d5. Very cold-blooded play by Mickey, this. Bishop takes f1. King takes f1. Rook b8 just hangs on to his material. White goes rook d1.
So I guess if he plays knight b5, is this going to end in a draw or what?
Knight b5.
Well, just attacking the rook.
Yeah.
Then maybe knight takes a7 could be dangerous, wouldn't it?
Well, doesn't he activate the rook?
Well, he does, but I'm just wondering.
Knight takes a7, rook c2.
Yeah, that looks good. It looks good, I guess. I was hoping to play knight c6, but it doesn't really do anything. You just take on b2, yeah.
Okay.
Well, knight c6, I mean, what's happening after that? I don't know. It's very unclear.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is a highly tactical game, which is what encouraged me to stockfish notate everything before the session. Probably I should have just stuck with this game.
Is black not playing knight c5 now? Is that right? Yeah.
He does, yeah. So white still
carving on.
Knight takes f7. Now he goes b4.
Wow.
So
crazy stuff.
rook d8. B takes c5, B takes c5, and this is where white should just get his material back with bishop takes f7 check, and it'll be a draw.
Yeah, I must say I slightly prefer white in that bishop ending, but white can bring his king up now.
Yeah, well, I guess they both will.
Yeah.
So we get bishop takes, king takes, and now if white takes, then you take with the bishop.
You need to
king up.
Yeah, they're in time, aren't you?
Yeah. So there's no blockade on c4 or anything to worry about.
No. Yeah, it's a dead draw. against a player F3 and shake hands.
Yeah, but Shirov actually blundered, which is surprising for him. I mean, maybe it was time trouble because he spent a lot of time calculating. But a player. One thing I've noticed about very strong players is that they just calculate a lot better than me. They're a lot faster, and it's been very noticeable with quite a few of them. I've sort of seen close up and played. Vishy Anand, it's unbelievably fast, and you get the same with Kramnik, Shirov, some other players as well. Gawain Jones in the UK, like just calculating like a computer almost. Anyway, now White played Bishop E3, which is a blunder because Black can simply go out the way with his king.
Yeah, that was always a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and now the bishop, if it takes the rook, well, it does take the rook. Black gets the rook back.
Yeah, suddenly dead lost.
To rook d7, and it's winning for Black. And the rest of the game was pretty efficiently conducted by Mickey.
Well, he's just the exchange ahead.
Yeah, exchange up, and yeah, White played on hoping to resist, but ultimately, he's not going to save this.
Resistance is futile.
Resistance is indeed futile. This is a very good move, c4, sacking the pawn to get the rook to the 7th.
Yeah.
h4 takes f2
Yeah.
check. King here, rook c2, bishop b3, rook h2, a4, king g7, and at this point White threw in the towel and resigned.
They never let their opponents into the game, strong players, when they've got a winning position.
Yeah.
Rare as a hen's tooth.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a pretty interesting game. What I think this game shows, one of the things it shows, is you have all the brilliant dynamic play by Shirov, but with Mickey Adams just acting as like the casino. This, by the way, is how I play table tennis. I let my opponents play all the brilliant shots, and I'm the casino trying to bank on their mistakes. Arguing that if I get 55% of those points, then I'm going to win.
In the long run, you wipe them out.
Well, they're very good players. They will make me run all over the place, sadly. And I think you can play this style in chess as well, as you mentioned before, the sort of rope-a-dope London system. If you can't see an awful lot, then you might as well be a solid player and look for endgames and let your opponents take the risk. And this is what Shirov did in this game, and came a cropper, as we have seen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing he didn't take the rook when he could do. Why did he? King h8. Yeah, I just missed the fact that Black can play king h8.
Yeah, it could have been time shortage because he calculated so much before that. Yeah, but it was a remarkable little thing in that game with him missing rook d8.
There's hope for us all.
Yeah, well, it's getting a bit late in the day. But I think on that note we can wind it up for today, and the next episode is on Saturday, when we are going to be interviewed by Jacob Fortuna, who's a Twitch streamer, and we'll be inviting him on the show, and he will be asking us about our chess, because we've done it with with Malcolm Payne and Adrian and Charlie. So we shall be the well, what's the word for it? Victims. We should be the victims on Saturday.
Simply asked, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the breaking news. I think Paul Littlewood's coming on the show next week, Nigel.
Ah, right, fantastic.
So that will be interesting to interview him.
Right. Okay.
And see his games because he's a very enterprising player.
Yeah, and he's had a life outside chess as well. You know, which is I think he was in he was in bonds or something, or was it bonds or gold or something? He was.
I don't know.
Yeah, he was working in an investment company. So, thanks very much for coming, everybody, and we will hopefully see you on Saturday.
Cheerio.